welcome. Now, I have to ask, not that I can see the show of hands, but I'm curious. How many of you are getting some sort of extra credit from Brian for attending this? Anybody? Okay, glad you fessed up. I did a concert recently in Maryland, and half the audience came up afterwards and asked for autographs right here, and I thought that was pretty cool until I realized it was just proof that they had attended. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks a lot. I have had several tapes and recordings made of me on this trip, and I pop them in to keep myself awake and to irritate myself when I'm driving between one show and the next. And the theme seemed to be that I was talking too much. That was what it seemed like to me. Dude, shut up and just play a while. So, at least for the first song, that's what I decided to do. I'm going to start out with some original pieces from an album called The Collection. And that one is one I wrote for the only neighborhood bar left in my neighborhood in Salt Lake City. Never was a big tavern culture kind of a town, Salt Lake City. And this was a place when I was a little kid, the post office used to be across the street. And I always wondered what went on in there. It seemed mysterious to me. And so I wrote a tune for the old gentlemen that were always queuing up right around the opening hour of this place. It was called The Tap Room. That's the name of the song. The Olympics came to Utah in 2002, and we all thought we were going to make money on them. And the only money I made was writing the music for a carpooling commercial that never ran. They wanted everybody to exercise their civic restraint and not drive much and carpool when they did. And they had a video they shot, and they hired me to write the 30 seconds of music for it. The whole thing got shelved when it turns out that all the high Olympic potentates were going to have the inner 3 lanes of the freeway reserved for them. So we lost our sense of civic responsibility when we found that out. But anybody that writes music will tell you that the first 20 or 30 seconds is the hard part. Getting that idea going, getting you motivated and say, okay, here we have something here to work with. So once I had that, I just expanded it into this piece called Hot Spot. Thank you. Thanks. In 1984, I was asked to write a song for some friends that got married up in Idaho, and they asked me to write a wedding processional and play it there as they came down the aisle, and I was happy to do it because it was a joyful occasion, and they were good friends, and it gave me a good goal to aim at. And I even, as you figured out from the last tune, if you got 30 seconds or a minute going, you may as well finish it and make something out of it. So I did. I called it The Delicate Dance, and I put it on my second record and even named the record after it after a while. And played it a bit here and there, but it was kind of pretty and didn't really have a concert-y kind of a feel to it. It was more of a wedding piece. And then 9 years later, they got this horrible, pitiful divorce. And I wrote him another song that I play a lot more often than I do the Delicate Dance. It just seems to have more bite to it, I guess. War Games. Thank you. Well, you know, sometimes I wonder whether an instrumental piece, especially on solo guitar, where you only have a limited kind of number of sounds you can make, really, as opposed to some orchestra where you can have French horns play something and timpanis play something and violins. I wonder if it can actually ever be about something. You know what I mean? If it can actually claim to tell a story with the guitar. Maybe what I mean by when I tell where these songs come from is not what you're supposed to hear when you listen to it, but what drove me to write it, which is maybe close enough. But this one, I tried hard enough to tell a story and failed, and finally I just had to give up and tell the story before I play the song. So then you're listening correctly as you go through the song, which is much more important on this one, I guess. But anyway, this song was born out of a concern I had. It seemed like no matter who I talked with, nobody was really happy with where we were as a country, and I wondered if we somehow thought we were immune to the tides of history that all the other cultures have thought they were immune to too until they weren't. And I got to thinking about that, and then I somehow was putting away a bunch of old stuff, getting rid of stuff in the basement, and I came across my 10th grade English book, and there in the front was a poem I'd had to memorize. It fell out when I opened the book. I'd had to memorize this in 10th grade, and I said, aha, this is what I'm trying to think. This is what I was trying to say and trying to understand. And the poem just captured that thought perfectly. So I ended up writing a long song about it. It ended up on an album that Windham Hill put out not too long ago called Sounds of Wood and Steel. And then it ended up in a slightly different recorded form on my new record. So I'm leaving the collection record behind and going to my new record, The Ladybug Stomp. This is the song Ozymandias. Some of you may remember that poem if you ever went through that same section of English, but it goes like this. I met a traveler from an antique land who said, 2 vast and trunkless legs of stone stand on the desert. Near them on the sand half sunk a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read, which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear, my name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty in despair. Nothing beside remains round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare. The lone and level sands stretch far away. Thank you. I've had the good fortune to perform in Europe, particularly Italy, quite a bit over the last 5 or 6 years, and I've picked up, enough Italian to have a fun time from the stage. And the main person I have to thank for that to get me started was an Italian guitarist, whom some of you may have heard, Beppe Gambetta. And the idea of Italian Americana guitarists with kind of a worldwide reputation is kind of odd. So if you took Giuseppe Verdi, this is for Beppe, if you mix, take Giuseppe Verdi and Doc Watson and Mario Batali, and if they all had a love child, that'd be Beppe. I wrote him a tune after one particularly eventful dinner we had, just called Beppe. This is also on the new record. Thank you. Thanks. To thank Beppe, I brought him in to do a concert in Salt Lake. And I opened the show for him, and we had an audience of maybe a little bit bigger than this. And it was the way the stage was, the people were really packed up against it so that you could almost, the front rows people's heads were right about here. and stage was up quite a bit. Well, right in Beppy's very first song, which was a blazing bluegrass number, somebody gets up right in the front and they have to leave. I assume they were a doctor or something and they got paged, Why would they come right front and center, want to be there, and then get up in the first song? And I go, man, this is really disruptive. He was, struggling and tripping on people's feet, and everybody's looking at him, And I'm watching Beppy go, what's he going to do about this? And he stops. And he has this charming accent, And he leans over, and he says, oh, sir, please, sir, do not stop. I will play better. That guy still left, but here's a title song from my new record. I was imagining that my last trip to New Orleans when I wrote this, it was a funky, one of those jazz blues clubs that smelled like 100 years of beer. And the band consisted of a tuba player, clarinetist, guy playing drums on top of an old suitcase with some, sticks and brushes he'd brought, and a washed-up bass. Just funk. It was just funk, top to bottom, kind of old bluesy funk. It's called the Ladybug Stomp. Thanks. I'd like to jump over to another record now that I've done 3 from that one, and I began to make recordings at around 1980, and my first commercial release was a vinyl release in late 1982. Vinyl, we're talking vinyl. And the next 6 recordings after that were all focused on original music. And that was my vocation. It still is largely. But I took a brief break from that in the year 2000, and I decided to get out all the old vinyl that I'd listened to and make a record based on all the stuff that I had been influenced by. So it has everything: pop, rock, Celtic, bluegrass, folk, old time, blues, jazz, classical, all different arrangements of pieces in there. And I want to play a couple of 3 from that to finish off this set. Little moody blues. Thank you. I'm going to finish up with a medley that goes from Germany to the British Isles, from Bach to the blind harper and famous traditional Irish composer Turlough O'Carolan, who were contemporaries, although I don't think Bach was influenced much by Irish music. So this is the first movement, the beginning of the first movement of Brandenburg Concerto No. 6, followed by the two Irish jigs, Cúla and Merrily Kiss the Quaker's Wife, also known as Bach to Ireland. Thank you. I'll be back in a few minutes. This is a piece I opened the collection record with called Over the Pass. And its big claim to fame was that it was used for 3 years by a big AM station in Seattle as the background music for their helicopter traffic report. That is something. All right, so I was talking with Brian earlier about the ratio of driving to playing guitar. If I could just figure out a way to practice while I drove, I'd really be on to something. And I know an individual whom I shall not name, a name you're familiar with, who has done this. He's not proud of it, but he does it. When he gets out there in the wide open spaces, he has a little 3/4 size guitar, and he has these leather things he wraps around his knees, and they grip the wheel from below. And he puts it on, cruise, and just looks out over the dash. There he goes. You know, you think texting is funky. Wow. This is a song I wrote about the longest tour I'd ever done. On the way home from it, I had to drive 2,500 miles in 3 days and then leave the next day for another tour. So this was on the second day after 2 days that were almost 1,000 miles each. I'm in Kearney, Nebraska at the Super 8 motel going, what am I doing with my life? And looking up at the blinking smoke alarm up above the bed in the room. And there was this rhythm to the road. In those days, I-80 had these seams every so often, and you hit them about like this if you're going 70-something. Just like that. So that forms the rhythm of the song when I get into it. It's just called Interstate. Thank you. Thanks. I very seldom write something that doesn't have a title almost before I start writing, before I get involved in it. Once in a while, though, I just have this itch and something happens and I don't know why I wrote it and I don't know what to name it. And when that happens, I just go to the store and I name them after Celestial Seasonings products. There's always a good sounding 1 or 2 or 3 word Celestial Seasonings product that'll fit any mood, you know. So if it's, you know, I've got one called Sleepy Time on my first record. I got one that got on the Windham Hill Guitar Sampler and just sold a ton called The Emperor's Choice, which is not a bad drink either. And then I've got one on the new album on the 12th string called Red Zinger, but this one here is the most caffeinated one of the bunch. This is just called Morning Thunder. For a while, it occurred to me that if I could write enough of these and name them after those products, I could get some sort of corporate sponsorship. I'd drive around in a big, like, alternative biofuel van with big Celestial Seasonings logo on the side. Well, now, I know there are a number of guitar players here. I just know that. So, I am actually in standard tuning on the guitar. Be there for a couple of songs. I made a personal concession tonight to promise to do that because I knew there were a lot of guitar players here. And guitar players occasionally, they want to look at your left hand. And they want to see a chord they recognize. It makes them feel better. This is a Beatles song from the White Album. Thank you. I want to play a couple songs now, if I could, by a couple of my guitar heroes. Everybody knows Leo Kottke's name, but his sort of musical daddy and an indispensable link prior to Leo was John Fahey, who passed away a couple years ago. And so I want to play one of John's and then one of Leo's, if I might. I always take liberties with these songs, even though they're already guitar pieces. You think they wouldn't need to be changed, but I always change. Whatever I arrange, I change. It's just a rule. This is called The Last Steam Engine Train. I like it because it only has 3 chords in it. Yeah, it's kind of a nice break after all this jumping around. Thank you. Thanks. Well, the very first record Leo put out turned a lot of heads, mine included, and drove me to go right out and buy a 12-string right off the bat. And try to figure out all those tunes and hear how many years later, 40 years later. This is my arrangement of one of the tunes from that very first record. The original is called The Sailor's Grave on the Prairie, and I call mine Revisiting the Sailor's Grave. Or in Italian, Rivedere al tomba del marinaio nel campo. Thank you. Thanks. Well, I thought I'd like to, these days, one of my New Year's resolutions is to play something new, brand new. And that's what we got here, dang it. I played in a festival in Florida last year, and they tricked me into, they said, "You want to do a little TV thing for us to help promote the festival, you know, 5 minutes?" I said, "Oh, yeah, no problem." Turned out that the way they'd gotten on air was to promise that I would play the theme song for that TV show. And I'd never heard it. They told me this as I was flying out there. I got the phone call on a Thursday, and I'm flying out to Miami Beach to this festival. And I get off the plane, and what waiting for me as soon as I checked in the hotel was an MP3 of the music to listen to. And all it said on it was Deco Drive. I didn't know what Deco Drive was. It turns out that was the name of the TV show. It was an afternoon drive time, chatty, what's going on around Miami Beach kind of show, and they wanted to help promote the festival with its appearance on it. So I was supposed to play it the next day, Friday afternoon. So I go up to my hotel room, and I put it in and listen to it. And it's just a miserable little 30-second thing, just a lousy theme song. Here's how it went. There was a bass beat, and it sounded really bad and synthesized. The whole thing was really bad synthesized. That was the bass. And the melody went like this. That was it. Then there was the second part, just when you're giving up hope. When you're hoping for something cool, here it comes. That was it. Serious composition. So the owner of the festival is named Henry. Henry calls me up late that night in the room after I'd been there and had time to digest. He says, "Well, Chris, what do you think? Can you play it?" So I put the phone on the table and I go. He goes, "Oh, great. Sounds just like it." So I said, "All right, Henry, this is really pretty exciting." But I even went to the trouble. They had it in an odd key, not a guitar key, and I even went to trouble learning it in their key because I knew they were going to go to a commercial or come out of a commercial, and it would be nice if it, corresponded with what I was doing. I put a little effort into it, and they take me in there the next day, and they make me play this for 4 different levels of the of the TV station hierarchy to make sure it was good enough. The assistant producer's assistant first, and then the assistant producer, and then the producer's assistant, and then the producer. And then they finally decided it was okay. And they slap a little makeup on me, and I go in there and do my thing, and Henry talks about the festival, and we're all happy, and everybody's really, just how cool that is. And I get back, and we have the festival, and have a good old time. And then I get home the next week on Tuesday. I'm working in my guitar room, and I have all these things spread out. I'm working on different things I'm thinking about. But what do you think? It's stuck in my brain like a barbed hook. So I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take that and try to make something out of it. It's going to be like an assignment. Can I do something with this? I'm allowed to change it and add to it and write extra parts, but what can I do that has built around this that doesn't suck? So that's what I'm going to play for you now. This is just called Deco Drive. Thank you. Thank you. I want to finish up with some more folk and traditional music if I can. Before I do, I'd like it if we could thank Brian for doing this concert and putting the series together and working so hard to make it happen. I know there are others, but he's the lead dog, Aaron. Now, y'all remember how the Irish jig sounded in the last set, right? You know, it's nice 6/8. Of course, all the jigs have that going, but it's happy and optimistic, and it's major key, and it makes you want to grab a pint of Guinness and a bonny lass and dance about. That's the idea with the Irish jig. With the Scottish jigs, which I'm going to play for you now, they're generally minor key. They're war songs. The idea is you're supposed to want to grab a cudgel and paint your face blue and run down the hill behind Mel Gibson and brain the invading barbarians until they slink away on their ships. It's quite a different feel, and they're a real challenge. So I look forward to playing them. This is a Scarsa Tatis and the Lyndhurst jig. And I want to thank you all too for coming tonight on a Thursday night out, on a cold Thursday night. Thanks again. Thank you very much for listening. Thanks.